can let you know that everybody's been handed these little cards with the QR code on there. And this QR code will point to a website that'll have all of the contents from the talks that you hear today and tomorrow. There won't be anything on there now, so don't try to scan it with your smartphone while you're sitting there. But after every session, we're all going to upload talk content. So if you have links and stuff that you see inside our talks, you'll be able to access that and example VIs, et cetera, et cetera. And so probably over time, maybe even more material. And so, are you ready to get rolling? We're going to get rolling. I'm going to introduce the introducer. This is Chris Ralph, who can tell better stories about Becky than I can. So, maybe that's not such a good idea.
So yeah, my name's Chris Ralph. I actually work with Becky at VI Engineering. You probably recognize us from our keynote this morning, which everyone thought was fantastic, right? Thank you, Fab. So Becky, originally out of college, started working as an applications engineer at National Instruments many years ago, not that too many years ago. Worked her way up through the ranks there, ended up working in sales in the Michigan area, which is where we are based. Took some time off to raise a family, 2 gorgeous kids. And then ended up working, I think your next job was at General Motors, right? Working at GM? I'm so sorry. Built up a fantastic reuse strategy, architectural team there, and then we were lucky enough for her to move on to work for us at VI Engineering. She's one of our senior systems engineers and a great LabVIEW talent, both architecturally and now heads up our reuse group there as well. So we're very, very lucky to have her. I'm very proud and honored to be here to introduce her today. And this is a topic that has been very close to Becky's heart for many years, and more recently mine, because she's made me more of a convert. And it's a topic that it's very easy to set up within LabVIEW, as you'll see, and it gives you many, many benefits in both the short and the long term. So I'm going to hand it over to Becky. Don't call her Rebecca. Ladies and gentlemen, Becky Linton.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me in the back better now? We're good? Okay. So let's move on. Let's start looking at the problem first off. So when you guys are sitting at your desk and you're given a new project, your boss comes in and says, I need you to do this. What do you do? Create a new project. Is it blank? Yes. Okay. Anyone just do a VI? That's almost worse. So this is what I would call blank VI syndrome. At least you got a project. And so, and this typically I used to do.
How about regarding the project and getting rid of all the things?
Oh yeah. Do you ever open an old project and then just, I'm going to copy this whole directory and delete a bunch of stuff? No one does that, right? No. And so, thank you. So that's kind of really what we're here for today, is to talk about a better way to do things, a better way to start, not necessarily from scratch. And so we're going to talk probably about 3/4 of this presentation is all about project templates. And everything's going to be do-it-yourself. I'm going to teach you the tools you need to build your own project templates. We're going to look at some shipping examples, a really simple one, and then a much more advanced one. I'm going to talk about a few community examples, and unfortunately, there's not that many. So I expect all of you to go home, create some, and post them online, okay? And then you can be the next LabVIEW champion, too. We're then going to talk a little bit about more maintenance and deployment. So that's kind of a pain point with these and some reasons why people don't go that route. And then at the end, I do have a few other starting points, so we're going to expand our toolbox. So it's kind of interesting. NI's actually come a long way with the getting started window. Some of you may recognize a lot of these versions. 6i is kind of where I started there. And they've gotten better. And you'll see here, they're kind of trying to force you to not start with a blank project, right? At this point, they're getting farther and farther along where they're like, we really don't think our customers should start there. But there's still a little bit of a brick wall. There's still something there because most people say, okay, create project, or they can find file, new, ... and they can still find that blank project. So my goal really here today is to break down this wall. I want to give you guys the tools and the knowledge to do this yourself. And yes, those are my kids. So these are your toolbox. So the first example I'm going to go over is a very simple one. So if you know basic LabVIEW, if you know what a project is, you know what a VI is, and you can, maybe you're not an XML expert, but you can at least read or copy paste, You can probably do this yourself. This is all you need are your hand tools. Then we're going to move on to a much more advanced version of this. So this involves LabVIEW, object-oriented programming, and scripting as well. So I'm not going to create one from scratch. We don't have time in there, and I'm not going to explain like object-oriented programming or scripting in general. But all of this stuff can be posted online, and so you can refer back to it on what's going on. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's look at a shipping example for the simple state machine. But before we even go there, project templates haven't been around that long. They've actually only been here for 4 years. They were introduced in 2012. The idea was, and I don't know who at NI authored the whole thing. Who was behind it? Darren, anyone? I don't know. No one wants to admit it? Come on, they're awesome. I know, Darren's worked on the Delacorte DQMH, so. Oh, the NIQMH, okay. Is Darren in here? Is he hiding? No, okay. Oh. So the basic idea is we're going to give you some fundamental building blocks as a starting point. So there's all these common architectures that people use, whether it's a simple state machine or a huge framework for a compact DAC or compact Rio, and they're common across the board. Everyone should have a not starting from scratch. They're well-adopted, well-used design patterns. And so the simple state machine, if you've never done it in LabVIEW, if I click on that button back before that says Create Project, this is my window that pops up, this dialog. So most of you already admitted, honestly, that you go to Blank Project. So what I'm going to click today instead is Simple State Machine. And that opens a new dialog. And there's not much on here. It basically says, define your project name. Tell me where you'd like your project to go. Do you want to add a prefix to every file that we generate? And of course that's optional, it says. And then if you really want to get fancy, you can add an overlay. So I just put a little NIWeek overlay there to my example. And then I press Finish. And miraculously, on disk, if I browse to that location, a folder will be created, and within that folder is this project. Whatever I necessarily hadn't copied over, we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about how to get this to happen. And the other beautiful part is this is the code that's in the simple state machine. I want to point a few things out here. So the code NI gives you is very well documented. It uses bookmarks, it has color-coded comments. So a lot of companies I know at VI within our reuse, we're trying to standardize on a bunch of things. One of them that I'm pushing is like color-coded comments. So that way if I pass my code to someone else and they're looking for something, they can search for a bookmark, they can search for a color just with their eye to immediately identify it. And project templates are kind of a way to help enforce that. It could be. Different topic is how we have it now. But it could be, and there's different routes depending on how you want to go. This one's code needed, yeah.
Those are saying, here's stuff you need to change in this template.
The way all the NI templates are is code needed. So this is where they think you need to modify their code. And then a lot of the other comments are just kind of an explanation of what they're doing there in their architecture. And so on disk, it's also not that complicated when I do the generation. Here's that folder that got generated. It put some controls in a subfolder, some documentation. There's that main VI that I showed as well as the project. So there's not too much there. But at least it's a starting point, right? So now we're going to actually get to do it ourselves. Let's talk about what's going on behind the scenes. Within the project templates, within the LabVIEW installation directory, there is a project templates folder. And there's 3 important folders. There's category overrides, metadata, and source. And I'm going to cover each of these individually. So the category overrides folder shows the categories that appear. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's 2 categories on the left. You'll see all, which means show all my templates, and then simple projects. So I typically have not modified this at all, but if you wanted to add your own category, say your company name or a certain architecture or something you guys do, you would need to modify this XML. What do you need to do that? Copy category, paste category. It's arbitrary. So if I want to move the first one, that template's down, I could make him 300 and make mine 100 if I want to be at the top. And so it's kind of how you guys want to do it. So there's not too much to just add a category, and then it just appears on the screen. The metadata folder similarly, yes?
What if you install
The new LabVIEW?
the new SQ1?
We'll talk about that a little bit later with deployment. If it's a service pack, it's kind of an overinstall, and it does not replace stuff you've added. But a new version of LabVIEW, you'll need to basically, bring it up. The metadata folder by default from NI when you install contains this LabVIEW core template metadata XML. If you have like hardware installed, like certain drivers, it also installs additional XML files. So what I recommend is leave the NI files alone. Look at them, see what's in there, but don't touch them. You can always just create your own XML. Open the NI one, do File, Save As, and we have one that's like VIE, and it's in, and then all of our templates go in there. Now there are a few required tags within your XML document, as well as optional tags. Due to time, we're not going to go over every single one, but in the presentation slides afterwards, I have the definition and how to actually format it, so in the notes of the slide. So here's what's just part of that core template metadata. It's a giant XML file, and there's multiple project templates listed out with those tags. And so there's a few I want to talk about. You'll notice here a couple things. So this is what we actually see in LabVIEW, right, when I'm loading the project template screen. And so the image that appears, do you see that little like state machine image? I'm defining, where is it at? Right here. So there's images, state machine, small. That's a 32 by 32 pixel image. You can put bigger ones in and it kind of grows it, makes it look weird, so try to make it state of the NI standard size. The documentation path here. So do you see the hot link for more information? That's an HTML page that launches when I click on it. So you could have this huge thing that describes what exactly you're doing, what code should be added, what you want your developer to be doing, and have it load by them clicking on that. And that just points, and these are all relative paths. So it's within the same directory. And then my source folder. So if I narrow that, like dig down in there, like LabVIEW 2015, I have my project templates, my source, my core, I then have Actor Framework and a bunch of these. And so let's actually look at the simple state machine. So I'm just kind of digging my way down through the directories. And within here, I have localization. I have images and I have documentation. Now the documentation is where that HTML is. It kind of goes back, if I go back a few slides here, to that. So this is that relative path for documentation and images. This is what it looks like on disk. Right there. So the HTML file is buried in there as well as the images in there that appears. So this is the source of my project template. Now let's compare the source folder where my project template's coming from versus the code that actually gets generated. Did you guys notice anything there? Localization's gone. Images are gone. So by default, the LabVIEW architecture that is built in for project templates, if you use the same folder structure and same setup, it won't move those over. So it does move over the documentation. And so I'm going to do a quick demonstration here. Let's see if we can put it on the screen. Other way. So what I have here are two examples, and we're going to look at the simple one first. So remember I mentioned the two I'm going to change today are the metadata and the source folders. So if I go in metadata, I have my XML, NIWeek. Now I'm just going to open it with Notepad++ so you guys can see it. I do recommend using something else. That's all I have installed locally right here. And there's not much to it. So localize, yes. I actually don't even specify any localization, so it'll just skip it. But I say NIWeek 2016 simple demo. Demonstration of a simple project. It should appear in the templates desktop. I should be able to search for it with these keywords. There's the location. There's my main project. There's my picture. And there's my documentation. And so what I'm going to do now is look at the source. So the source here isn't too much either. I have a subfolder called NIWeek and one called Simple. If I open that project itself, there's not much there. There's just a main VI. And I think I have VI's logo on it. And that's about it. This is all that's in there. So it's a VI. There's literally nothing on the block diagram. It's just so I can show you that files are getting moved over. So I'm going to close that out. So all of this code is just on my desktop. So I have this NIWeek demos, and then I go into Simple. So what I can do is open the folder on disk. So I have this already open, and if I bring up the full path, you'll see this is the National Instruments LabVIEW Installation Directory Project Templates. And I'm going to actually back out to here. So all I'm going to do is copy these over. Oh, let me show you something first, actually. I want to prove something. So in LabVIEW, if I say create project, and going to get the dialogue here. And I just want you to kind of take a quick look at this search. There's nothing, if I search for VIE, there's an actor framework one that shows up. I probably modified that. But there is nothing that actually shows up with our logo, right? Nothing's there right now. And so I'm just going to copy this over. VI engineer. Oh, that might have been another one. So now look what happened. So all I did was copy those files into the installation directory in the proper location, and the architecture that NI has built in has basically identified it. And it says, oh, there it is. It puts the VI logo in there like I told it to. If I click on more information, it actually opens the documentation and so forth. And so I'll actually run it so you guys can see that it exists. So we can see the code. I'm just going to let it go to the desktop. If I bring this up. No. Here. You'll see I have untitled projects. It was the second one actually that got generated. And there it is, the exact same one I just had before with main, everything's still there. It's the exact same VI. It was basically just copied everything I had in that source folder. So behind the scenes, it automatically generated it. Does anyone have any questions about doing a simple one? Okay, so you guys are all going to go home and make them, right?
When you made the original simple one,
Mm-hmm.
where was its folder? I mean, 'cause I noticed you copied the metadata and I forgot the source.
Mm-hmm. It was just on my desktop for now.
Okay. So you were copying them back into where LabVIEW stored.
Expects it to be, yes, because I wanted to show you guys how it loads.
Right.
And we'll talk about a bit later how to do like subversion and version tracking and stuff with it, because that is kind of a challenge. And so now that we've kind of done the simple one, let's go to a more advanced one. And I don't expect you guys to know the actor framework, use the actor framework. I just picked this one because it's one of the only ones that NI has that uses some of the advanced techniques. That's actually a shipping example. And so in the actor framework, when I say create template and I choose actor framework, I get a very similar dialogue than before. Does anyone notice any differences? There's the icon disappeared, right? The edit icon overlay disappeared. There's also some more stuff. It says like first task name and icon, second task name and icon. So that's not the normal standard one, right? It still wants me to know where am I sticking it, what's my name, but it's also asking for additional details. And then when my project generates, look at that project. There's now libraries in it. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on, right? And it's also named. So if I name it Alpha and A, and I open that library, that icon's going to have an A on it. And it's labeled Alpha. If I had changed that to Becky, it would say Becky. So it's customizing it based on what I'm putting in here. It's not just copying and moving my code. And so the generated code on disk, they try to organize it. We have our alpha actor, and again, had I named alpha Becky, it would say Becky actor. So it's completely custom to what I chose. And so let's look at what's going on behind the scenes here, because this is a lot more. There's a few tags that changed quite a bit. The first one I want to point out is this metadata class. Did that appear at all before? That was kind of hidden, right? And so what is defined here is a child of a class that NI has existing on disk. And so they created a child of this class, and they're saying this is where he resides. The other thing is this custom VI mode, that after page 2 no UI, and then the custom VI path. So this tag here tells LabVIEW how to handle that. It says, after page 2, meaning after I press that finish button, what do I do? And in this case, we're saying, run this VI, and there's no user interface. There's also one with the user interface. There's a couple options there. And so now looking at the source code versus the generated code, you should see a few differences. Some stuff's still the same. We still have like an application launcher, but they changed some of the names there that's going on based on what I did. So anyone guessing behind the scenes what's happening? Any guesses? Tim's got it, scripting. So there's a lot of scripting. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So what do I need to do to make this happen for me? The first thing you need to do is define your child class. In the actor framework example, they name theirs 2 tasks metadata object. And it's a child of this metadata object class. And this is installed when you install LabVIEW. This class is there. There's really only 2 key VIs that you guys need to worry about changing. So my first attempt at doing a fancy one like this, I actually used the actor framework code and completely stripped it out. So I was trying to see what they were doing, what changes I made, and how it works. And so the key things you really need to worry about are the spec page. The spec page is what you see at launch. It's that thing that was asking what my tasks are, what the project name is, where I want to store it. That's your spec page. The second thing is this post-copy scripting. So, okay, I'm going to do my generic copy of some files, but then what do? Do I change the files? Do I rename them? What's happening there? And so here's an example of the spec page that's there. The block diagram isn't too bad. So if you've done any OO stuff, this is basically a constructor. So we're basically saying to more specific class, that metadata object, there's templates for these, that metadata object comes in. I'm telling you, you now go to my class, and then as the user changes things on the front panel while it's running, it populates the class. That's what's going on. So this VI is actually relatively simple. What's kind of cool about it, though, is this is just a user interface. It's a dialogue. So if you want to do fancy stuff like when they disable or check a box, stuff can appear and disappear. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do at that point. Now this one is just a small portion of the post-copy scripting. I know it's kind of an eyesore, but rather than have a state machine, I've seen people use state machines in different ways. The actor framework example is just a huge, long string of what happens. And you can kind of tell some of the stuff. So these are some of the paths coming in, relative paths of the code that was copied. And then it's like update the localization, update the icons, change window titles, change captions, rename stuff. So each of those is performing an individual task to the project that was initially copied over. Does anyone have any questions on that in general? Has anyone attempted this? Anyone made one of these? I got a couple. Did it work? Wait, did it work? It worked great. So you can come up and get a fan afterwards. Yeah. I have prizes. And so I'm going to do a quick demonstration of this as well. So I have basically something similar. Let me get my mouse over. First, we're going to look at the metadata. And notice one thing I did was leave in the original project template. You can have more than one project template in this metadata XML. Each one just gets defined with its own tag. So I left my original one, my simple demo, and I've now said, okay, let's add a second demo. So I now define my metadata class. I have descriptions here, I have all my paths, all of that stuff still appears, and I have some stuff that runs. My code is actually just the same code, and I'm just kind of copying it over. But one thing I wanted to point out is the reason my code structure, the architecture I have as it is because I can have multiple. So right now, like you notice, NI had their core, and then they had all their examples within core. So what I've done is create an NIWeek subdirectory, and within there, created directories for my multiple examples, and then I just sort of expand the relative path in the XML. So it's just a way to better keep it organized on disk. And so this is very similar to before. I'm just going to copy over my metadata and source, which now contains both versions. I'm going to replace the existing ones. Just to show you guys too, I didn't show this earlier, but in metadata, there's the 2 that were installed when I installed LabVIEW as well as my new one. And then within source, I now have core, and then I have NIWeek, and this is where my examples reside. So now when I press create project, come back. There it is. You see both. Why did simple demo appear above advanced demo? Anyone? The priority. I purposely set that so it would appear below. So the NI starts with 100, so I made mine 10 and 20. So they would appear above the NI examples there. It's in the metadata XML. So in that file that I had open. So if I go into there, you'll see it right here, sort priority. So a completely arbitrary number, lower is higher. And then the one thing I did was I actually just kind of changed my spec page so you can see that it's different. So I'll click next. And the main thing I changed on this is if you actually look, where was it, this one? Yeah. So I changed the population. So before, it had it because it was like I had run it before, but this one pre-populates with the user desktop. So usually it's blank. So it's kind of a simple change. There's different things you could do. I didn't change too much. I have some slides about more advanced one I did in a little bit. So one thing I didn't mention so far is this new Project Wizard folder. So if you want to do the more advanced one, like the one we just talked about, I would go to this directory. This is very useful. It's kind of buried in the LabVIEW installation. So before we've been in like LabVIEW 2015 project templates. Well, buried in resource dialog, there's a folder called New Project Wizard. This is where the metadata object class resides. This is where that parent class sits on disk. There's also a folder of templates for the after page 2 actions, as well as the spec page. So this is kind of an important folder that it's not really published too well, but it is there, it exists, and I recommend starting from here. So quick summary of the two types of project template creation. We have the very simple ones. Did I even have to do scripting or anything, right? All of you should be able to go home today and do that first one. Take some project you have on disk, move it into the folder structure, copy and paste and edit some of that XML, and you're good to go. It does it for you. The more advanced ones, there's a little bit more to go on there because you have to create your child class, custom VI mode changes, the custom VI path, and then of course the spec page to get it to do what you want. Any questions about the difference between the two? So I do want to mention a few community examples. One, of course, is the DQMH. Fabiola's up here. It's the award-winning DQMH. So this one, at Alliance Day yesterday, they actually won the LabVIEW Tools Network's Community Contribution Award, which is kind of cool. So a lot of customers have started to develop this. And it's based on the NIWeek message handler. So you started with the code NI gave you. So this is a great example of taking something that NI gave you and adapting it to your own needs. And so what she did was go ahead and said, okay, there's some missing features that I think a lot of customers need. And so they started building it for themselves, I believe, and then expanded upon it. And so what's also great is there's scripting tools. Because at the beginning, it asks you, do you want this module? Do I want to include this? How many modules? And so let's say later on, you want to add additional ones, you can. Some of those tools are built in. And if you want to know all about the DQMH, Bob is talking tomorrow at 4:45 in room 16B, just a little bit away. So that whole presentation will be on that. Yeah. So Veristand custom device. Another one that I found very useful, I was actually given from the NI Systems Engineering team. I've done a lot of work recently with Veristand custom devices. And what happened was they had this great template. But there were some features. They kept saying, every time you probably want to add a disable option. You probably want to be able to change some of the pictures and so forth. So I basically took theirs and completely changed it to fit our needs. So one of the options they had was choosing the different type. All of our custom device types were going to be asynchronous. So instead, we had a different format going on, so I changed that. I just replaced it with something else. And so it was relatively easy for me to take their code, modify it, and then I had a number of junior engineers generate about 30 different custom devices from this template. So it was a great starting point, and they didn't have to worry about making sure things were in the right libraries or so forth. It was all handled for them. So now to some of the important stuff, maintaining the source code. How do I actually keep track of it? The first thing is, please use source code control. I'm sure everyone in here uses it, right? There's not a few, no lingerers. But make sure you use it, because the changes can be minor. Avoid modifying the NI folder structure. A couple of reasons for that. If you do have to reinstall LabVIEW or something, it might overwrite yours, especially if you're modifying NI's XML files, because you're like, oh, I'm just going to stick my project template in the NI XML. Well, then when you go to reinstall LabVIEW or for who knows what, it will overwrite it. So you will lose yours if you're modifying the NI files. So I've kind of talked about some of the folder structure and where to place things, and you'll have access to that obviously in the notes here. And so as long as you follow that, you can keep your own thing independent of what NI is doing. Now, there's two common solutions I've seen people do for source code control and how to do this. The first is I'm going to check my code directly out of my repository to the LabVIEW installation directory project templates folder. That's kind of okay, but it depends on what you're doing. The one I like better is like kind of what I did today. So maintain your code elsewhere on disk and copy and paste back and forth as you're doing your development. And so like I had my code, you had asked that earlier. My code's just sitting on the desktop. I make some changes to it, and then I copy it back over to the folder and see if my change is carried or if it's behaving as I expect it would. So at VI, it's kind of a common, I guess a mixture is what I do, yeah.
But then, I mean, where does it live when you commit it?
When you commit it,
Yeah, because you're going to put that in source, in Subversion.
that's deployment. So in Subversion, it's going to be whatever directory I want. We have a reuse directory at VI Engineering, and it's where our reuse code lives.
Okay.
And we have a project templates reuse folder. So project templates get their own structure in there that matches metadata, matches source. So it kind of matches up.
So when you build it, you put it on the desktop, but then you're going to put it into your project template folder where we get put it in
Yes, the deployment, yes.
And then you're going to put it, copy it into the LabVIEW folder to actually use.
Yes, I deploy a little bit differently. We'll talk about that in a minute. So deployment. Another question? No? Okay. Yeah.
So, let's say I have an active framework project, and I have a child active that's abstract, and I want to create a concrete child in my project, and I want it to inherit from the abstract. Where do I put the abstract active?
It really depends on where you want it to be. And so you're basically using that abstract as like a template, almost, to generate new ones
I would
from.
use the template to use the abstract and create a child of the abstract. I mean, I think that's a common use case, is that you would be creating a child class of something that's this is your foundational stuff. I'm creating a new version of this project with concrete children, A through Z. And I need all of the parents to live in source code in the right spot, and I need them to live at a relative path in the right spot, because I'm going to build on a different server that has a
Different
different
machine,
relative path,
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. So,
You're going to answer? I'll let Bob take it. She's got an answer. She's like biting at the bit here. She's like, I got it.
So what you do is you build your parents as a package, right? And then install them on your machine. They will be installed in their library, user library, wherever.
They'll already be there. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever you want to install. And then you build your project source, inheriting from that. And then you build the
Second
package for your
package.
project template. So you look at the developer image, for example, there's like 5 different packages in that thing. Because there's the one that has just the palette for the queue message handling, that's a class that you're going to be inheriting from. Then it's the one that has the shipping examples. Then there's the one that has the project template. It's like 5 different things. So that's like, and that way, when you go to the different machine, you apply the packages, whether the FTC or install the different packages manually.
And just to mention, so the question is like if I'm inheriting and doing some different stuff with, I guess, classes, how would I handle that? And we do something similar. So we have like a user interface template that I've built, and it does inherit and stuff, and like Bob was basically saying, which we'll talk about in a minute for deployment, and I do it with multiple packages. So it's a dependency at that point. So real quick before I move on though, from a source code control perspective, on my developer's machine or like on a VM that I'm using to develop my customer software, I don't check it out. I wouldn't recommend that. Don't do the first one. Don't check it out directly into the installation directory. Use the deployment method I'm going to talk about on the next page. However, I kind of cheat because I have a VM that I do all of my reuse development on, and I do check it out to there just because it's easier. So as I said, I kind of do like a mixture of both. Does that make sense? Because that virtual machine that I have is set up only for my reuse development. So that's when I'm checked out to that directory. And so let's talk about deployment. This is what Bob was alluding to. And so there's really 2 options. One is to do kind of what we were just talking about, which is to utilize source code control, have people check it out. The better way, and the way we do it at VI Engineering, is to use Package Manager, VI Package Manager from JIK. It installs with LabVIEW, and you can actually, one of the options or one of the destinations is project templates. So the base path there is the LabVIEW project templates directory. You could add subdirectories for source and metadata to make sure your files are going into the exact places you want, or you could just take those 2 ones and put them in there. And so if you have a lot of dependencies, like other classes, other libraries of your project template, my recommended route, and I guess what Bob would say too, is build independent packages that's just for those parent classes, that is just for the other dependencies, and then build your project template completely independent of it, but make those dependencies to this project template. So when I go to install, hey, I need to install Becky's project template, all the dependencies, these parent classes, everything says, oh, you have to also install these packages. Should I do those as well? Yes. Does that make sense? Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about are a few other starting points. So one of them is palette editing and place VI contents. Most of you have probably used OpenG in here, but might not know what's going on behind the scenes on some of this stuff. And one of them is the comment. So you'll see there, you can actually place VI contents. The way the color-coded comment works in OpenG is it is a VI. It is literally on disk, a VI, and it has that color. On the block diagram, if I open it, it has that exact thing. It's just a green outline with green text that someone has predefined. Oh, Chris did that? Oh, good job, Chris. I didn't even know you did that. Yeah, and so when you go to build your palette set, you can actually check this little box that says Place VI Contents. And so what it does is it grabs the block diagram, and instead of putting like a sub-VI down when I drop it, whatever was on that block diagram, it just copies over to my new block diagram. And so the other option is if you are using Package Manager and you're building your palettes, there's a little check mark there for it as well. And if you haven't played with it, I recommend it. It's kind of fun to see where it's at. So if I go to Tools in LabVIEw, can you guys, nope, let me move it over. Tools, Advanced, and then Edit Palette Set. The palettes will appear, mine are over here right now. And what you can do is you can actually go in and change things. So if I find one that has a good sub-VI, like File IO, I could say Place VI Contents. So instead of dropping that as a sub-VI, it would place whatever's on the block diagram there. So functions, obviously, that's not an option. But any sub-VI, you could technically go ahead and change the NI palettes for yourself.
That's also really good just being for general shortcuts. Like
Yes.
my favorite ones I made is I have a VI that just has two, an error in and error out cluster. And I just have like VI contents and it goes right into my block diagram.
And drops it, yeah.
And there's my two clusters.
And so it's just a quick shortcut for yourself, for someone to use. Yeah, and then you quick drop, and it's even faster. Another thing is VI templates. So Jeff Bohr, he's another champion. He's the one who kind of came up with the idea for this. And this is where he spends all his time. So I kind of lean towards project templates, but he spends a lot of time on VI templates. We were talking offline about this, and he said he has probably like 100 different VI templates. He has one for every scenario, or he's got, you know, the front panel labeled with error in, error out. It's already on the connector pane. Everything's set up. So he never starts from scratch. He always starts from a VI template. So the extension's VIT. You can get to it by File, New. And it's not as hard to put in there as you'd want. So to do it yourself, all you really need to do is copy your VIT file into the right directory. This is very similar to project templates. So you'll see here on disk, National Instruments, the LabVIEW installation directory, there's templates, and then frameworks. I even went so fancy that I added my own folder. So you just add a folder, and then within that folder, you could put your picture. And then I also have a text document there, NIWeek.txt, and all that does is how it shows up over here. So I have a category, do you see it there? It says NIWeek 2016 demonstrations. So if I were to open up that text where it says NIWeek 2016, that's what's written there. It's all nicely spaced out. And LabVIEW knows, because the folder name and that text document name are exactly the same, that's how they correlate. That's how they correlate. That's how it's all set up. And then again, any VI template, the name of the VIT, as long as there's a PNG for it, that's what will appear on the right-hand side. Just magically appears. So a few other tips for VI templates, because people tend to get confused or get mad about it. So if I were to open a VI template on disk, like let's say I'm in Windows Explorer and I double click on a VI template, it doesn't actually open the template file. It opens a new instance of the template. So you pretty much have to either go from the LabVIEW file dialog, open, and then browse to it, or if you've already added your VI template within a project, you can double click on it. So to create the instance, which is basically it takes the VI template, opens a new one, and wants you to save it as something else, I would double click on it from disk, like I said, or in a project, you can right click and say new from template. So it's kind of reverse of what you think. Because I double click on disk, it gives me a new instance. I double click in the project, it opens the real one. So they don't correlate. So something a lot of people don't know, that they don't exist or don't use a lot of our control templates. So these files also exist. They're really useful for scripting. So if you start to do like the advanced project template that I was talking about, start with control templates. Because what you can do then, when you're doing scripting, if you feed in a template, it knows what to start from, and it's a lot easier to tell it wire from here to there, replace this, rename this, if you have a template to start with. There's a lot more scripting if I have to make LabVIEW say, add this VI, add this control. If the template exists, it's a little bit easier. They're really useful for enums, references, and objects. That's where I definitely spend time on it. And another thing is actually icon templates. So some people don't even realize this exists. So every project we have, I mean, hopefully most of you do right now, but make sure you can save it as a template or a glyph. So you can either save your own text off. I have like a number of the text things edited so it fits, because I have to narrow some letters down. So I have my own library that I install as well. But just keep that in mind and combine it with your project templates. So does anyone have any questions? I know I went fast. I'm a fast talker.
That's not more of a comment. I use the VITs. You can use the VI Package Manager builder to install those in the right folder
Yes,
for you.
exactly. Same deployment option.
Right.
So what he said is, when he uses VI templates instead of project templates, but I discussed the deployment options, he does it the same way. So those folders that I just told you guys to put it in, you can use VI Package Manager to put all your VITs in a nice folder, package, and format, and install it on disk. Anyone have any other advice or questions?
I use VI template, icon template,
Mm-hmm.
I end up putting them in the same place that LabVIEW does.
Mm-hmm.
But you're, and of course then any version of LabVIEW can use them.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a way of hiding, of putting them inside the NI folder.
Yes, I also use Package Manager to deploy them to that folder. So there's another, it's not shown, like up in the upper right corner, see where it says 2015?
Yeah.
That's tied to your LabVIEW version. You can also build a system package.
Well, I don't mind it being
Yep.
LabVIEW specific, but I didn't know how you got it into there.
Yeah, I do a lot with packages and package dependencies.
Okay.
And I think I got like heavily involved in Package Manager just from being in charge of reuse, yes.
I have two classes that are under
Mm-hmm.
the message-based system, kind of like I have like a UI actor that is template, and I have a message object in it about classes. And I use the group toolkit's own class
Yep.
function to use those two.
Yes, and that's another way to do it. So there's the Goop toolkit. If any of you are involved in the object-oriented program, I definitely recommend looking at it or installing it because there's a lot of shortcuts like that to just save time. That's another route to go.
Do you not put VITs on the palette that shows up? So you pull it into your block diagram, and then let you know that, oh, this is actually a new, and now you have to save it into the block. So you have to do that.
I haven't actually tried that. Has anyone tried that?
I'll try right now.
Okay, Tim's going to try. We're on the spot. We're going. So the question was, can I put a VI template, like the actual VIT file, on a palette? Do you know? On a palette, and then when I drop it from the palette, will it know to save it as a new instance?
No, actually,
I don't know. I wouldn't think so.
And there's the problem also when you have a price content, and that has inside a CPT, we actually place the CPT, not the new instance.
Not the new instance. So it might place the template instead of. Go, Tim, go.
Brian will look you up
Yeah.
tomorrow on that. He can tell you how to if you drop something onto your VI, how to make it magically morph into whatever you want.
Yeah, that's true. That's more of an X notes. Come see Brian Hoover's presentation tomorrow. Brian, what time is your presentation? 3:30. So a lot of these presentations, like the techniques and technologies, can be combined. So Brian's done a lot with X nodes, and so that's 3:30 tomorrow. Same room, room 15. Yeah, so we'll be here. And I've seen it before. It's a great presentation.
Do you build specifications for those templates?
Yeah, I believe if it's part of the project, yes. The project that gets defined. So that was a question earlier too. What if I have multiple projects? Because maybe I have a couple projects as part of one project. Like I have this kind of a framework that goes, and there's a couple projects that tie things in. So you can still do that, but the issue is in the actual XML, the metadata, I can only define one project. And so you'll have to use the more advanced scripting method to make sure all those other projects come over and their dependencies and everything comes with them.
In the user template, in template, BI template, you can also, I didn't know that you could put them in the tag manager. So I've always browsed the user template, and once you do that, if you have them sitting somewhere on your disk, it will stick it in there.
Yeah, it adds it.
Now, the next time you open, there it is.
And it's kind of, I don't know if it shows. Yeah, you see right there where it says browse.
Right.
So he's mentioning if you browse to it at one point, that directory will be stored there. So the comment was, if you don't want to go through building a package, but there's a difference too. Yours are in there, but now you don't know what version your user is using. So there's a benefit to using Package Manager because I can say, wait, are you using version 1.2 or I updated it and we should be on 1.3 right now? Yep.
You're absolutely right.
No, I just want to make that point to everybody else. That's the easy way to do it. So, but if you want to make sure there's other things going on. Any other questions? And again, if you've done the advanced template and it worked, please come up and get your fan before you leave today.
Is there a project templates that isn't in the LabVIEW installation, like in LabVIEW data?
NI Systems Engineering has some published on GitHub that you can download and install. The Delacorp ones you can install. That's from the LabVIEW Tools Network. But those are really the only ones I'm aware of that aren't in the LabVIEW installation directory. And LabVIEW won't notice them or pick up on them unless they are put in the installation directory in the past that I've defined. Yeah. Elijah Carey's got one for a hardware abstraction layer as well online. So you'll find some on the forums every now and again. You'll see some stuff. You've got one in the Tools Network. And hopefully you're all going to go home and upload them all, right? Next year we'll have a whole presentation on what everyone's created over the next year. Yes, MyRio had to use Project Manager.
You talked about the hardware abstraction here. Could this handle just you saying these are my generic Skippy inputs, or like my generic string inputs, these are the Skippy outputs that correspond to it?
Yes. This is a really common thing to do with hardware abstraction layers, like within companies. So these aren't often publicly made knowledgeable. But what will happen is they'll have the parent class, and they will have a project template that says, I'm building a new layer, or I'm building a new instance of it. And so it takes that code and gives the user a real starting point to go from. That is actually a common use case. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, is a hardware abstraction layer a good use case, or can you use it? Anyone else? Oh. Okay. So Tim just did our whole experiment. Can I put a VIT on the palettes? Yes, but when I drop it onto my new block diagram, it's still a VIT. It's not actually a new instance of the template itself.
But it will run as normal.
But it runs, yeah, it runs. But that's not really what you want, yeah, that's not ideal.
Still lost the option to drop the icon.
Yeah. Which then you have to save as new, and you're all set to go. Or you can do scripting. And I definitely know, if you guys are going the second route with scripting, you should really look at VI templates. Because I'm telling you, with scripting, that's a savior. Anyone else? If not, thank you for coming, guys.